Hello everyone, this is Michael Cruz from the RESEC team. We are working with the Ray Erie Sports Engineering Center, working with the International Olympic Committee to develop a central planning tool. Now, let's meet the team. I am joined by Kobe Kirkland, Amel Vazovich, Riley Ritter, Andrew Huang, Andrew Putlock, and Zach Colano. I will now pass it over to Amel to introduce the project.
The goal or purpose of our project was to consolidate manually entered data and provide planners with relevant stakeholder populations based on a variety of different features. Our plan of action included first, mapping variables to functional areas and identifying functional areas of interest, then creating a mock-up wireframe model of the interface, and then building a database and schema to source data for the model, and then constructing an interface using Fast API and Python packages.
As Amel stated, we first started with some functional area analysis. A functional area is a specific field that a person at the IOC could work at. For example, a person could work in the cleaning and waste department, or they could work with the event services department. We first tried to figure out exactly which functional areas would be inputting data, which would be outputting data, and which one didn't really matter to our model. And this is what we came up with here. The main fields that will be inputting data are the Olympic Broadcasting Services, Hospitality and Ticketing, NOC Services, Olympic Family Services and Protocol, People Management, Press Operations, and Sport. The rest will be looking at the data inputted by these input fields, and next we had to assign the different variables to the different functional areas. For example, the volunteers, contractors would be in the cleaning and waste department, and the athletes and the spectators could be in the athletes or in the sports games or the ceremonies. We will now look at a wireframe mockup. From our interface mockup, we first have a login screen. Based on the login screen, people will be entering in their credentials, and that will be related to a specific functional area. We are then taken to the welcome screen where you can see an input and a view data tab. As I previously stated, some functional areas will have the ability to input data, some will only have the ability to view data, and which you can see examples of those specific slides to the right. Next, we did some initial analysis with 2016 games in Rio. For example, we looked at average press first time a day. As we can see, the average press is greater during the evening. We then looked at where the press was present the most. As we can see, the opening and closing ceremony brought in the most press. I will now pass it over to Kobe to explain our application in the full stack data pipeline flowchart.
Here we have a visual to walk through the flow of our pipeline and highlight some of the softwares we're using. Starting in the top left, we use the manually entered data from the IOC planning committees. From there, we wrote a script to extract and clean the data for the database. The database is powered with PostgreSQL and connected to the rest of the system using Fast API. The website will be the interface for the functional areas to access the manually entered data. The visuals for the website are powered with Plotly. The last piece is the seeding analysis done by Andrew and Riley. This would be fed into the website using Fast API to help the functional areas analyze the current data. Amel will now talk a bit more on the structure of the database.
Here is our schema to our database. We begin with a session table where each session is an event in the Olympics. The sport discipline table goes into more depth about each sport. The venue table describes each venue where an event takes place at, such as the location. The timetable talks about when each event takes place. The VPM and attribute tables talk about each stakeholder and their respective populations. Here you can see an example of our application. So for example, you are able to filter through any sport and see any relevant information regarding that sport. You can also do the same for the time of day. So if you filter in the morning, you can see relevant information regarding sports only occurring in the morning.
After picking a sport on the previous page, it then takes you to a sport page. So this page has information specific to the sport, such as how many sessions it has, how many medal sessions it has, and how many days it runs over the course of the games. So for each of these days, it then gives you the numbers for the stakeholder groups and specific attributes. So you could see that for each day, it has a certain amount of press, it has a certain amount of broadcasters, and all these functional groups. And this also allows you to filter to do broad range for every single person, all the ticketed, all the accredited, or you like smaller ranges in the stakeholder groups and specific attributes for across the games.
We also performed analysis on past Olympic seeding data to find information and relationships that IOC could use to better predict attendance at future games. So for every session during the Olympics, the IOC allocates a certain number of seats for the family members of the competing athletes and for other Olympic athletes to come and attend the event. So using that data for the past 3 Olympic Games, we were able to come up with some charts to show different relationships among the different events and among the data. So looking at the first chart in the top left, this shows all of the instances where less than 25% of the allocated seats were used for a certain event. And so the different colors show the past 3 Olympic Games, London, Rio, and Tokyo. The size of the bubble shows the total time of that event in minutes, and then whether it's a circle or an X denotes whether or not that were a medal session. And so based on this data, we can get a good feel for the overall picture of how many seats were provided for events where less than 25% of seats were used. And then going off of that, our chart in the bottom center of the graph shows all of the instances by sport where less than 25% of capacity was reached. And so based on this graph, across the past 3 Olympics, we can see that basketball had the most specific sessions where less than 25% of those allocated seats were used by either the family members or the athletes. And then it was followed by volleyball and soccer. And hopefully the IOC is able to take this data and tweak the amount of seats that they give for some of these events based off of the capacities that they've seen at past events. And then we also wanted to see whether or not an event or a medal session affected how many seats were used and what capacity was reached. And so this chart in the top right shows events where more than 75% capacity was used and breaks it down based on whether or not that were a medal session. So we can see that in fact medal sessions do tend to drive higher attendance, which is something we thought would be the case and the IOC thought would be the case, but now we have some numbers to back that up. And so using these relationships and hopefully getting into a few more in the coming weeks, we're able to provide the IOC with some potential areas to look at to make this process move more efficiently and then also maximize the different seating at the venues of future Olympics.
We would like to thank RESEC, the IOC, and the Datamine for providing us with this amazing opportunity. Thank you to Jan Anders, Nzumbe, Fabio, Colin, and Rodrigo for helping and guiding us on this project. We would also like to thank Dr. Mark Daniel Ward for providing us for the resources to make it all possible. A special thanks to Nick Rosenhorn as well for being a tremendous help and assisting us in all aspects of the project.